In 1972, I was working as a barman in the Dog and Duck in Athlone, just outside Athlone, and just Bloody Sunday happened, and a couple of weeks after Bloody Sunday, I decided to join the army. Why, I don't know, but I ended up in Custom Barracks at Athlone, and went in. I think it was about 12 o'clock in the day, and fell at the gate, didn't know where to go or anything, you know, the usual. This fella said to me, go up as far as the dining hall and get a lunch, and I'll put you in touch with the recruiting sergeant. So the next thing anyway, after lunch, I met this fella from Donegal. He was McMonigle. He was a brother of John McMonigle, who had been here with the 17th Battalion. So I was sent over to the medical hut. You do your medical, the whole lot, test your eyesight. I had a few pints before I went in. And
settle the nerves.
As I was doing the eye test, the fella in front of me was reading the chart, and I could see, I said to myself, he's reading it wrong or else I'm drunk. So I said to myself, I better read it the way I see it. So I read the chart the way I seen it anyway, and it seemed it was all right. It was, the other man's eyesight was bad. So that's how I ended up. We had a couple of weeks then because you had to wait for a platoon to be formed. So I think we were there about a fortnight and we started training. And I had never been in the FCA or the RDF, so I knew nothing about the army. So I said the best thing to do now is just keep my mouth shut, listen to whatever is told to me and try and learn it off. So that was the way it started. First impressions of the barracks in Longford, it actually was the first time I was in it when I came down here, but I had been stationed in Finner, so Finner was no great place. There was no square in Finner or anything at the time. The wash houses were about 300 yards from the billets. You had to walk across in the morning in the cold. And Longford was much the same, except the wash houses and that were closer to the billet I was in Longford. Now the square wasn't great, it was a small square at the time. There was still a lot of ongoing work in the barracks. So the barracks didn't daunt me because cavalry barracks are more open than the like of Mullingar or Collins's in Dublin. They're more spacey or they're not as claustrophobic. So it was okay in that line. But living accommodation, everything was rough and ready in Longford. The dining facilities, you brought your own knife and fork, spoon over to the dining hall. Everything was fairly basic. The old wooden huts were still here, the Nissan huts. The 4 new huts down the back were just being built at the time. So we were here, I was here about probably 6 or 8 months before we moved into those new huts. So my first impression of it was fairly okay, as I say, because the experience in Finner wouldn't have been that great. So, well, as Noel said, when I came here first, it was a bit daunting because the cavalry were very active. Like when I was with the infantry, like you got your rifle out of the store, you got mounted, you got into a Land Rover, and you headed off along the border and that. But here they were more specialist because I wasn't too long here when I was put on an 84 course. Now that would be an infantry weapon, but I seen all these fellas and you'd be wondering would I make the grade with these fellas. And we did the 84 course, fired it in the Glen and everything like that, and then we were on to gunnery courses and different things like that. So you found it more specialist. But the basic thing that you did along the border was much the same. Because most times when you went to the border, you were doing patrols, recce's, whatever. And the border at the time was probably a fairly intimidating area at the time, because it was around that time the church in Swanton Bar was blew up. There was people killed in Belturbet. There was a lot of this stuff was happening on our side of the border. So yeah, it was tough enough. At first there was one thing I suppose. A canteen was open for the men. There was an NCO's club opened, and then there was an officers' club open. So they were all availed of by the people in the town as well. So this became a great social area for the people of the town as well as the soldiers. In fact, a lot of the time the soldiers wouldn't drink in the canteen, they'd go out to town for a drink, whereas people from outside would come in, they'd be delighted to come in for a drink into the barracks. If one of the children of a soldier had cancer or something like that, they'd do a panel pull, they'd raise money for the like of that. It was a great unit for the like of that, and I suppose when you're really seeing how good it was when someone died. And when fellas died, they were usually 17 or 18 years of age, So this affected the whole unit, It was like a family. It was like a bereavement in the family. So if the funeral was in Sligo or Granard or wherever, the whole unit went there and they did funeral drill, did the whole lot, put on the whole lot, give that person a great send-off. They're serving overseas.
It was a good buddy of mine, he got killed in Beirut in an accident. And I suppose, I remember when I came here first, Dutch Doherty's.
That's right, yeah.
I was involved in Dutch Doherty's funeral ceremony, but I never knew the man, I never served him, I never knew him. And you get your eyes open fairly quick with what people think, because these are all older lads and the hard and cynical soldiers, but Jesus, you're looking at guys and they're putting their heart and soul into this thing. They want to give this man the best send-off they can possibly give him. And then when they came around and it came my turn when we lost Jonathan, it was the same. And it took a week for him to come back from Lebanon, and the whole week everyone was practicing. We were here every night, or we were out in Campbell's house every night. And, that's special, isn't it?
No, it is, yeah. They really did. That's why I thought so much of the unit. Really good investment in when they really started, we'd say, in the 80s, and put in the tarmac all around the square, we'd say, and the like of that. The new huts down the back that I mentioned that were under construction when I arrived, they were a big addition to the barracks. Then there was several changes down through the years, like when I arrived here, the officers' mess was beyond in the main building. But later on then it was moved to the infirmary there, which is the big house there as you're coming in the gate, it's on your right. Different orderly rooms were changed around on several occasions. The 17th Battalion were relocated. They were in the main block at once. Then they moved over to the ESB office. And all those buildings were fairly well maintained. And even the buildings inside where the living accommodation in the main block, they were very well kept. And when we left here, I think in 2009, this barracks was immaculate, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And did soldiers do all the maintenance and remodelling, or was it always contracted builders that did it?
No, sometimes the soldiers actually built, the engineers built this area we're in here at the moment now. And they did a lot of maintenance work in the barracks, but there was contracts given out to civilian contractors at times. We'll say the tarmacking of the square. If there was a big job to be done in the block, refitting the windows or anything like that, all that would be. So there was a lot of money being spent in the area. It was a great connection between the barracks and the town, especially with the squadron anyhow. And it meant so much to the town because you had the 17th Battalion based here as well, and both of the lads were in the 17th Battalion. Every now and again they had camps here, and during the summer there used to be huge camps here. I seen camps here of 300 and 400, and they all used the town for the fortnight they were here. Then there were weekend camps, where fellas were in for weekend camps. So it meant a huge amount to the economy of the town all the time. The like of Don Tidy being kidnapped, there was 1,000 people using this barracks at this time. And only a few times in the history of the barracks would there have been 1,000 people in it. Probably just before the First World War, Lord Granard's regiment was here. There was about 1,000 stationed here before they went to Gallipoli. And then during the emergency, there would have been another probably over 1,000 between this barracks and the one up the road, the artillery barracks. I remember Paddy Kelly, he was killed in Dorado Woods the day that Don Tidy was released. Paddy was from Ballinamuck. Now, he wasn't stationed with us. He was stationed with the 6th Battalion. And I spoke to Paddy here in this building that morning, as he was going up, he told me that he was after getting caught for duty to drive an officer up. And the next thing that evening, I just heard that Paddy Kelly was one of the ones that was killed, along with the young recruit guard. So, the like of those things you'd remember, you know. I remember they were doing the digging at the gate. They were putting up that building at the gate. I think it was around the 80s. Do you remember that, Ray? Mm-hmm. And while they were digging anyway, they find the skull in the foundation. And this skull had to be sent to Dublin naturally for forensics, you see. So it was away in Dublin anyway, but the CEO of the barracks was coming in one day and he said to this individual at the gate, he said, did they find out who the skull was? And your man said, oh, they did, sorry, yes. He said, and who was it? Oh, he said it was an officer. And the officer said to him, and how did they know that? He said there was no brain in it. Longford was unusual that there was 3 barracks in Longford. There was this one, the cavalry barracks, the artillery barracks, and there was another one out at White Rock. It was a very unruly area in times past, Longford. I served with the 43rd Battalion in Lebanon, and it was a great experience. Found the people very nice, the Lebanese people very nice. Well, as the lads were saying, we were under threat here all the time. I think back from the 1980s we used to hear Longford is close, and it was always in the pipeline, you know. But we got a kind of immune to it. And I suppose when it did come, it came as a bit of a shock to us all. It was a very sad day. I remember the last day that we left. I was the last on duty. I was on duty on the gate for the last one. And the day the troops pulled out was the day before, and I remember that day well. Like, it was a very sad day for Longford, and there was people down there, hundreds of people in the barracks. A lot of them were in tears, you know, because it meant a lot to even the people of the town. As I said, they used to socialise. It was a great place to come in and have a few drinks, have a barbecue, everything like that. That day that all the troops left, then the next morning I was on the gate for the handover to the department, and the CEO at that time was Commandant Tom McGrath, and he handed over to the department, and they took the locks off us, and then they ushered us outside the gate and they locked the gate, and that was it. Lord have mercy on him, he said now. So he said to me, I don't know what you're going to Longford, he said. Do you know there's 2 horses buried under the cookhouse? And I was saying to myself, I wonder when did these horses die? But when I came down, I seen the headstone. 1873, Paddy and Smiler died. And your mum was telling me that the horses were buried under the cookhouse. so if I'm going to say anything, I'd like to say a word at Paddy and Smiler's gravestone there.